So I think we can start. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The 6,841st meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda of this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. I wish to warmly welcome the distinguished Secretary General, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, the ministers of the Security Council members, and other distinguished representatives present in the Security Council chamber. Your presence is an affirmation of the importance of subject matter to be addressed. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2012/686, a letter dated 6 September 2012 from the Permanent Representative of Germany to the United Nations addressed to the Secretary General, transmitting a concept paper on the item under consideration. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Germany. Your Excellencies, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations Ban Ki-moon, Your Excellency, Mr. Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Nabil El-Arabi, distinguished colleagues. Since Germany began its current term in the Security Council in January 2011, we have witnessed a dramatic change across the Near and the Middle East. The people in the region have expressed their hopes for dignity, democracy, for economic and social participation, for prosperity, and for the respect of their fundamental human rights. At the beginning, we have spoken of the Arab Spring. We have learned it would be better to speak of Arab seasons. The movement for change in the Arab world has not followed the same pattern in every country. Indeed, more than ever, the situation differs from one country to the other. But the process of change is continuing. We are all concerned about the recent turmoil in many Arab countries in response to a shameful anti-Islam video. Let me be very clear. I can understand very well that believers feel deeply offended by this horrible and shameful video. But the response to such provocations cannot be violence. There is no justification for violence and murder. Excellencies, what we are witnessing now is not a confrontation of religions, nor is it a clash of cultures. What we are witnessing now is a clash within societies. It is a struggle of the open-minded with the closed-minded. It is a struggle of the reasonable with the fundamentalists. It is a clash of the peaceful with the violent. This week is to strengthen those in all societies all over the world who stand up for respect and tolerance, for those who know that freedom and responsibility are but two sides of the same coin. There is no doubt where Germany stands. Now more than ever, we are with those who work for peace. We see the challenges, but we believe in the historic opportunities that the change in the Arab world is opening up. Germany's offer for a transformation partnership to provide education, jobs, and growth continues to stand. Excellencies, the League of Arab States has assumed a leading role with regard to regional peace and security. It has taken a clear stance on the conflicts in Syria and Libya. For the Syrian people, however, the perspective of peace still seems a distant dream. As the international community, we must be united to stop the violence and help initiate a process of political transition. We must find a common response. We owe it to the people. We appreciate the active leadership of the Arab League to halt the killing in Syria. And Excellencies, the change in the Arab world has made peace in the Middle East more urgent than ever. Negotiations are the way to achieve a two-state solution that satisfies the legitimate demands on both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians. We must therefore ensure that the peace process remain a priority on the international agenda. By endorsing the Saudi Peace Initiative, the League of Arab States has made a constructive offer that is of critical importance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that it is necessary to solidify and develop the cooperation between the UN and Arab League. The commitment of the Arab League to the values enshrined in the UN Charter is the basis for more cooperation. Above all, more focus is needed on what we can achieve together in the areas of conflict prevention and resolution. We need practical progress. For instance, we could think about more frequent briefings and consultations with representatives of the League of Arab States. I would also welcome the establishment of a UN office in Cairo to improve cooperation with the Secretariat of the Arab League. The time has come. As the Arab world undergoes historical change, let us seize the opportunity to open a new chapter of cooperation between the League of Arab States and the United Nations. I thank you. I now resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon.
Mr. President, distinguished ministers of the Security Council, Secretary General of League of Arab States, Mr. Nabil El-Arabi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time of historic and often inspirational change in the Middle East and North Africa. Several momentous transitions in the Arab world are on the way, moving ahead with difficulty, but in the clear direction of the freedoms that had been denied for so long. Yet, as old orders crumble and new ones struggle to emerge, and this is also a time of widespread apprehension and tragic violence. The peace process between Israelis and Palestinians remains stalemated as the window for a two-state solution narrows dangerously. The Arab League's Arab Peace Initiative remains an important part of the framework aimed at ending the occupation and achieving a long overdue agreement. I count on the continued generosity of the League's members in providing financial support for the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA at this time of need, and I urge your members and other members of the international community to do more in both regards. In Syria, the conflict has become a threat to regional and international peace and security. A human tragedy is unfolding in full view, but also in the darkness of prisons, under the rubble of entire neighborhoods, and in the traumatized minds of children. I appeal to all with influence to persuade the parties that there is no military solution to this crisis. Tensions in the region are also inflamed over nuclear issues. Members of the Council should do their part to discourage any escalation and to insist on peaceful solutions that respect the UN Charter and international law. There has also been unrest linked to an act of hatred toward one religion that has caused both understandable offense and unacceptable violence. Against this complex backdrop, I welcome this high-level discussion on the partnership between the League and this Council. Chapter 8 of the UN Charter provides vast opportunities for regional organizations. The Security Council long ago recognized the vital role they can play in consolidating peace agreements and enhancing peace and stability. With the new political era at hand in the Arab world, the Arab League has acquired a new sense of purpose. The League was among the first organizations to publicly acknowledge that the Tunisian revolution was rooted in economic and social disparities and the aspiration for greater freedom and justice. The League was also among the first organizations to condemn the atrocities committed by the former Libyan regime and I urge the international community to take action. Both the United Nations and the League work to help ensure the transparency of landmark elections in Tunisia and Libya. Our joint role has been most prominent in Syria. Members of the Arab League made significant contributions to the United Nations military observer mission. And of course, we have jointly appointed first a joint special envoy, Kofi Annan, and now a joint special representative, Lakhdar Brahimi, as our emissaries in the search for a political solution. These mediation efforts need solid and concrete support from the Council. Looking ahead, I see 4 areas that merit special attention. First, let us improve the exchange of information. Dialogue between our secretariats should be focused and frequent. Another avenue for enhanced contacts may prove to be the placement of the Office of the Joint Special Representative for Syria and his deputy in Cairo, a possibility that is being explored. Second, we should put conflict prevention at the center of our agenda. The United Nations continues to strengthen its ability to act early while helping regional organizations build the capacity for facilitation, mediation, and dialogue. Third, let us explore new areas for collaboration. The Middle East holds a vast potential for the development of sustainable energy. Let us explore what more we can do in the context of my Sustainable Energy for All initiative. Our relationship need not be limited to political action on the immediate crisis of the day. Fourth, let us ensure the success of the transitions that have been set in motion. We must continue to be ready to provide concrete assistance if and when requested. Outsiders can share their experience and encourage progress humbly, patiently, and respectfully. But the major work has to be done by and in each society. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this tumultuous time for the Arab region, people are looking to our organizations to be on their side in the fight for justice, dignity, and opportunity. The League of Arab States is a trusted partner of the United Nations. I look forward to working even more closely together to realize the aspirations of people across the arc of your membership. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency the Secretary General for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, His Excellency Mr. Nabil El-Arabi.
شكرا.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellency Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. I should like at the outset to express my deepest thanks and appreciation to my dear friend Guido Westerwelle, Foreign Minister of Germany and current President of the Security Council, for this initiative of holding a high-level meeting of the Security Council to debate the situation in the Middle East and the means to entrench the relations of cooperation and joint action between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. Such an initiative entrenches an important principle set out in Chapter 8 of the Charter of the United Nations, which encourages regional organizations to tackle issues in their regions by turning to the Security Council to find peaceful solutions to conflicts and to maintain international peace and security. On many occasions, the Security Council has moved in that direction. It has adopted resolutions supporting such a direction, most notably Resolution 1631 of 2005, whose paragraph 7 refers to regular meetings between the Security Council and regional organizations in order to promote cooperation in maintaining international peace and security. In this context, I must stress that transparency, clarity, and frankness are the bases that are a prerequisite for any cooperation between the two parties. So allow me, Mr. President, to speak transparently and to be clear and frank on the need of a necessary dialogue between the League of Arab States and the Security Council. Mr. President, the League of Arab States, which was established before these United Nations, believes that a fundamental pillar for international peace and security is effectiveness and credibility of the Security Council, as well as a full, faithful, and precise implementation of the resolutions of international legitimacy, particularly those of this Council. The League believes that non-implementation of said resolutions is one of the fundamental reasons for tension and instability, both regionally and internationally. The relations between the Security Council and Arab issues is very old as the birth of the United Nations itself. Resolutions have been adopted for more than 6 decades on Palestine, which is the fundamental central issue for the Arab world, which is the fundamental cause of tension and instability in the region for many decades, and is one of the oldest unresolved issues in the international arena. The League has always stressed that a just, durable and comprehensive settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict, with the question of Palestine at its core, will only be achieved through a complete, faithful implementation of the Security Council's resolutions. They have taken up all aspects of the conflict. The resolution has adopted many resolutions on ending Israeli occupation of occupied Arab lands, particularly 242 and 338, resolutions on the illegitimacy of building settlements on Palestinian land, the most important perhaps being 446 of 1979 and 252 of 1968 on non-recognition of measures taken by Israel, the occupying power in Al-Quds al-Sharif, resolutions on the occupied Syrian Arab Golan, as well as those relating to ending Israeli occupation of the remaining occupied land in southern Lebanon. It has also adopted resolutions considering that the basis of a settlement on the Palestinian track runs through the establishment of 2 states, Palestine and Israel, living side by side within secure, internationally recognized borders. Those resolutions were not implemented. Tension and instability have continued in the Middle East. The Palestinian people, the only people in the world whose issue has not been resolved, who has not obtained their right to their legitimate self-determination, freedom and independence, or indeed to set up their own independent state. Time has come, Mr. President, for us to review our calculations in the way we tackle this issue and to review the approach of the past, one based on conflict management rather than ending conflict. This, inter alia, requires avoiding double standards. It requires avoiding double measures, and with the exception of 1 or 2 resolutions adopted in the 40s, more than 200 have been adopted since. How strange. Not a single one begins with acting under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. So we really want the Security Council and soon review this matter. Mr. President, the Syrian crisis is deteriorating and escalating day after day. The fact that the Syrian government persists in the security solution, including the use of heavy weapons and military aircraft against its own people, the fact that it refuses to respond to all initiatives, including the initiatives of the League of Arab States, that has now confronted us with a serious and tragic situation. More innocent Syrians continue to be killed. The numbers of refugees flooding neighboring states is increasing. The specter of a sectarian civil war darkens Syria's skies, indeed the skies of the entire region, and is a warning of a potential regional and international catastrophe that will affect all and will take years to resolve, including threats to international peace and security. The League of Arab States has been keen to cooperate with the United Nations to resolve this crisis from the very beginning. Indeed, a joint envoy has been appointed for the two organizations in a new initiative to cooperate. The League of Arab States has turned to the Security Council and has called upon him, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the powers entrusted to it, to maintain international peace and security, to take the necessary measures to compel the implementation of the resolutions adopted by this very Council, to implement the plan set out by Mr. Kofi Annan, the former joint envoy of the League and the United Nations, and to implement the final document of the Geneva meeting of 30 June of this year that was agreed by consensus and with the participation of the P5 of the Security Council, and to lay the foundation of the beginning of a political transformation in Syria towards a democratic regime that responds to the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people. However, we believe that the very first step is to stop the bloodshed in Syria, to begin the transformation that ought to lead to a democratic regime, a healthy one that responds to the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people, to a life of freedom and dignity. However, once again, and frankly and most regrettably, the Security Council failed to achieve any of these objectives because of a disagreement among the P5. And I regret to say this. Those resolutions have remained dead letter. They are not being implemented. The serial killing and bloodshed, destruction continue unabated. And let me tell you very clearly, if we want the mission of Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, the joint envoy of the League and the United Nations, to succeed, he must be supported by the Security Council. The Security Council must support him in deeds, not in words. And it can do so by compelling implementation of its resolutions in a way that is binding on all parties. Binding resolutions must be implemented in a binding manner. Mr. President, the challenges confronting peace and security on which we may cooperate are many and multivaried. Some are traditional, some are nascent and spreading rapidly in this era of developing modern technology. In the past few years, the world has witnessed very concerning events because of acts offending Islam and our Prophet, may peace be upon him. While we fully reject and condemn the violent reactions in some Arab countries, irresponsible, reprehensible attacks against some foreign embassies and facilities, acts that most regrettably led to the killing of the US ambassador in Libya and other innocent citizens, I say that while we reject such actions that are not justifiable in any way, we would like to ring the warning bell. We are warning that offending religions, faiths, and their symbols is indeed a matter that threatens international peace and security now. The Charter of the United Nations begins with "we, the peoples of the United Nations," entrenching a principle stating that relations among people are the basis of international peace and security. Therefore, the international community must strongly, firmly face up anything that returns us to the abhorrence concepts of racism. We prize the values of freedom of expression. We believe that such principles must be respected and maintained. However, we don't see any relation between freedom of expression, which aims at enriching culture and building civilization on the one hand, and activities that merely offend and insult the beliefs, culture, and civilization of others, one that is an incitement to hatred and violence. If the International Covenant on Human Rights stresses the freedom of religion and faith, that does not merely mean the right to build houses of worship and practice a faith. It also means the right to respect, that such faith must be respected, must not be offended or insulted. If the international community has criminalized bodily harm, it must just as well criminalize psychological and spiritual harm. It is now clear that offending religion and faith is a phenomenon that does threaten international peace, security, and stability. The League of Arab States calls for the development of an international legal framework which is binding, based on Security Council Resolution 1618, in order to confront insulting religions and ensuring that religious faiths and their symbols are respected. This would also be based on Articles 19 and 20 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. We must work together towards a dialogue that increases understanding between cultures and civilizations and encourages tolerance. The possibilities of cooperation and coordination between the United Nations and the Security Council on the one hand and the League of Arab States on the other to confront the challenges in the Middle East are multivaried. In Yemen, efforts must be intensified to support the government to overcome the consequences of the political crisis and its economic repercussions, and to go forward towards reconstruction and rebuilding the state. As for the situation in Libya, we hope that the appointment of Mr. Tariq Mitri as a new representative to the United Nations will help to continue cooperation and coordination between the United Nations and the League of Arab States and its representative in Libya to provide all assistance to the Libyan people to rebuild the state and reconstruct the country. The cooperation between the United Nations, the African Union, the League of Arab States, and IGAD in Somalia has the credit of ending the transitional period successfully in Somalia and has set off the stage of permanent institutions. There has been success in Darfur as well as relations between Sudan and South Sudan, where tension must not be allowed to return. Therefore, the League of Arab States has set out an initiative for support to the humanitarian situation both in Blue Nile and southern Kordofan in cooperation with the United Nations and the African Union, supported by the Security Council. I hope that Presidents al-Bashir and Salva Kiir will reach a definitive agreement on controversial issues in Addis Ababa, and I hope that this August Council will give them the time necessary to do so. Mr. President, let me take this important opportunity to refer to a grave challenge before our region. At the end of this year, we are to take a step long awaited by the world. It is a practical movement towards creating a nuclear weapon and WMD-free zone in the Middle East. We believe that this would be the beginning of the road towards an international conference to be held in Helsinki with the participation of all states of the Middle East. The conference organization has been mandated to 3 permanent members of the Security Council and the Secretary General of the United Nations. It requires a formal support from the Council. We believe that this would eliminate the specter of a conflagration with the use of non-conventional weapons in our region. Dealing with the region, Mr. President, cannot be limited to looking to the region as a region of conflict and threats. Indeed, it is a region that can also be full of hopes and aspirations and possibilities. The challenges confronting our region are multivariate. They are not just political and military. They are also challenges of development and humanitarian issues. Our cooperation on all these issues and others in an effective, practical manner requires an updating, a review, more effectiveness in the relations between the two organizations, as well as new mechanisms. I should like to put forward some proposals in this regard. 1. We believe that the agreement signed between the League and the United Nations in 1989 on cooperation must be updated to keep up with priorities as well as emerging and future challenges. 2. Regular meetings as well as those required by events to be held between the Security Council and the League of Arab States, represented by the presidency of the Arab Summit, the presidency of the Council of Ministers of the League, and the Secretary General of the League. 3. Raising the status of the cooperation meetings held between the United Nations and the League of Arab States so as to enable them to reach true programs that are implementable, particularly in preventing and resolving disputes and maintaining peace. 4th, more importance given to cooperation between the two organizations in humanitarian assistance. In conclusion, Mr. President, I cannot fail to repeat my thanks and appreciation to you for your initiative to hold this high-level meeting, and let me thank all the ministers who have come to participate in the meeting. I hope this is the beginning of a new interaction between the two organizations to support peace and security in the Middle East, so that to transform the region from a region of conflict and crises to an area of security and stability whose peoples enjoy peace and prosperity, a region that may return to its historic status as a source of knowledge and a beacon of human civilization. Mr. President, the Security Council is looked to in the world as the source of international peace and security, and I hope this will be the case. Thank you, sir.
I thank His Excellency Secretary General Arabi for his briefing, and I will now give the floor to the members of the Security Council. I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Saad Eddin El Osmani, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Kingdom of Morocco.
شكرا جزيلا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, for his initiative to organize this open meeting on the questions of peace and security in the area of the Middle East, and on cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. We would like to pay tribute to the efforts by the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States to achieve common objectives to both organizations. We would like to reiterate to them our confidence and the support of the Kingdom of Morocco for their efforts. Mr. President, in this respect, over the centuries, the region of the Middle East was the cradle of civilization, which enriched human heritage. It was the theater also of a number of conflicts, which degenerated into open conflicts, from which the peoples of the region have suffered and continue to suffer today. The ongoing suffering of the Palestinian people is at the very heart of issues of peace and security in the Middle East region, and holds hostage the present and the future of many peoples. This means it is necessary to find a solution and a settlement to this conflict. In spite of ongoing efforts made over the last few years, the current conflict is still impossible to resolve because of the intransigence of Israel. This coincided with the movements seen in the region recently in terms of the legitimate aspirations of peoples for democracy and liberty. This means it is essential to understand these claims and these aspirations. Mr. President, we welcome this cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. And we believe that stepping up this cooperation today is more necessary than ever, especially because we are seeing developments in the actions of the League of Arab States and a renewed determination to strengthen the League's role to serve the peoples of the region. As we can see, the League of Arab States has proven that it is capable of acting with great effectiveness, as was the case with the crisis in Syria. We highly appreciate the German initiative of having a presidential statement that calls for tangible measures to promote this cooperation. And I would like to commend the measures that are highlighted by His Excellency, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, highlighting the importance of the Arab Peace Initiative. Mr. President, we must spend a few minutes looking at the Palestinian question, which today, more than ever, deserves particular attention. Unfortunately, Israel continues with its systematic defiance of resolutions. In this respect, we must mention the settlement building policy, which is a flagrant violation of international law and the Geneva Conventions. This policy is a major obstacle to the peace process, and it reflects disdain for international agreements. It even undermines the peace process. Moreover, we must talk about acts of violence carried out by settlers, Israeli settlers, against Palestinian citizens. Unfortunately, the response of the international community did not do justice to the suffering of these people. Let us not also forget the suffering of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Some of them have been detained and in prison even since before the signing of the Oslo Agreement. In spite of all of this, the issue has not yet been resolved. Mr. President, there are also Israeli attempts to change the civilizational and cultural nature of the very city of Jerusalem, in spite of the efforts of the international community. The settlement building in Jerusalem continues. There is ongoing work on the Grand Mosque. And this, in spite of all of the appeals, Israel continues operations to destroy other sites which are of particular importance for the monotheistic religions. In facing all of these challenges, the Kingdom of Morocco, whose king, Mohammed VI, presides over the Jerusalem Committee. The Kingdom of Morocco, therefore, calls for an end to all of the work to destroy sites and all activities against the Islamic nature of the city, and we urge the international community to take urgent action to protect the cultural heritage of Jerusalem. Mr. President, Israel also carries out policies that consist of imposing sanctions against the Palestinian people, which reflects disdain for all of the international agreements and for international law. The closure policy carried out in the occupied Palestinian territories and the ongoing inhuman blockades that are carried out on the Palestinian territories, including in the Gaza Strip since 2006, all of this has led to intolerable humanitarian suffering, which is getting worse by the day. From speaking at this rostrum and based on our profound conviction of the need to establish peace and security in the region, and the fact that this requires renouncing hostile Israeli practices against the Palestinian people, the unarmed Palestinian people. This is an attempt to impose a policy of fait accompli by the use of force. We would call on the international community to urge Israel to respect international agreements and agreements reached between the concerned parties. Mr. President, we must also talk about the suffering of the Syrian people, a brother people, and we would like to express our indignation and our condemnation of violence carried out by the Syrian regime against civilians. We must reaffirm the need to put an immediate end to acts of violence so as to launch a political process which would involve all of the groups of the Syrian people, all components, so as to achieve the aspirations of the Syrian people for a democratic, political, pluralist regime in the framework of national unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria without any foreign military intervention. I would like to reaffirm here the importance of international and Arab efforts to find a settlement to the Syrian crisis, including the mission of the Joint Special Representative, Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi. We also commend all of the efforts being made to resolve this crisis. Morocco will host the 4th meeting of the Friends of the Syrian People at the end of this month. And we hope that this meeting will help to dissipate the ongoing nightmare of the Syrian people. Mr. President, the region of the Middle East today is facing many challenges which the Security Council must try to resolve based on its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, so as to disseminate the spirit of peace and prosperity in the region. There is no doubt that acts which do harm to Islam and any kind of disdain for religion and incitement to hatred, all of this takes us further away from the principles of tolerance, dialogue, and respect. We reject these provocative acts, and we also refuse to accept any acts of violence which target innocent victims and property. I would like to recall that the Kingdom of Morocco, at the highest level, condemned the attack against the American consulate in Benghazi, which led to the death of the American ambassador in Libya, as well as 3 staff members of the consulate. We call for respect for holy sites and property. Mr. President, once again we repeat that cooperation between the League of Arab States and the United Nations is very important, and we hope that this cooperation will develop and become more in-depth. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Minister El Osmani for his statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Laurent Fabius, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of France.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Minister, my friend Guido. Ministers, colleagues, I have some observations on this very important subject. The first comment that I think all of us would share is that approximately 2 years ago, the Arab Spring, as we call it, began, and that at its beginning this gave rise to a lot of hopes around peace and dignity, freedom, democracy, dignity. But today the concern is here. Violence, extremism, radicalization, the using of religious feelings, the willingness of certain groups to bring about a confrontation between Islam and the West. In the face of these challenges, it seems to me that there aren't very many positions that are possible, only 1 or 2. Certainly this is France's understanding. We should show solidarity with these movements because we know by experience in each of our countries where there have been revolutions, even if the situations are different, we know that revolutions go through ups and downs. It's never a linear occurrence, and we must show solidarity with the best parts of these movements, but at the same time, and I do insist on this point, we must have high expectations, because the way in which these Arab Springs sometimes have progressed and sometimes gone off the rails shows that we have to be very careful with regard to a number of central issues. The rights of the individual, women's rights, the refusal of terrorism, the respect for communities and minorities. That is the first comment I have to make that I think will be shared by everyone here. My second comment has to do with Syria. You'll understand that at this occasion we wish to address this tragic situation. When I was preparing my short statement, I had said that up until now the conflict had led to 27,000 dead, and we hear now from the latest figures they've gone up to 30,000 dead. And as we listen to our Joint Special Envoy, Mr. Brahimi, things are getting even worse. I'm sure we all agree that this is shocking for international public opinion, that we, the Security Council of the United Nations, have up until now been unable to preserve the unity and the security of these United Nations, and it's shocking. I won't go into any finger pointing, but it's shocking that our Council has been unable to act up until now. And I'd like to stress two risks which are not mutually exclusive in this Syrian crisis. If the situation continues, there's a very high risk that Syria will explode, quite literally, and all those that would like to see the stability of the region that's already been very much affected will see that this explosion will be dramatic, and then there will be no solution to it. And at the same time as the situation might explode, there will be a risk, and it's not just a future risk, it's already current reality. There will be a risk that extremism will take hold. You all have the same information that we do. There are extremists who, over and above the convictions that each and every one of us may have, we must admit they have passed into Syrian territory. And in this respect, I'd like to make another comment. If we, as sometimes we do, if we could have a discussion between ourselves privately without all the cameras, I don't know anybody in the Council who would support the regime of Bashar al-Assad in the long term, remaining in the long term. I'm not referring to anyone specifically, but no one that I have discussed the issue with would support Mr. Assad being in place for any length of time, but he's still there. And we know that there will be an end to this regime, and as representative of France, I have to say the sooner his end the better, but we have to try and bring the positions together. He's here, he's still here, but he must go. So how can we ensure that this is done as peacefully as possible without creating an even greater chaos? Up until now, we have not been able to provide a response to this, but what we're being asked for, what the world is asking us for, is to be up to the job. The Security Council must be able to provide a response to this in the next few weeks, and France has become mobilized in several areas. On the humanitarian front, we provide medical aid, unification as far as possible of the Syrian resistance, the consolidation of the liberated areas. We are available in all of these areas, and this is where I would like to stress the point to the Secretary General of the League of Arab States. I'd like to stress the remarkable role that you have played from the very beginning in this Syrian crisis, and I'd like to bear witness to the excellent cooperation that there has been between your organization and the United Nations. You acted very quickly, courageously at the beginning of the crisis. You suspended Syria, which was no easy thing to do, and you did not hesitate to adopt sanctions to cut off the financial wherewithal of the regime, to neutralize its weapons supply routes, and you introduced the idea of a necessary political transition in Syria, and this is an objective that now is at the heart of the mandate of our Joint Special Envoy, Mr. Brahimi. when this council decided to send an observer mission to Syria, it was able to base itself on the experience that you yourselves, the League of Arab States, had, and you launched an important dynamic with the presentation by Morocco of a resolution to this council and the adoption in the General Assembly of the United Nations at the initiative of the Arab group of two texts that were passed by large majorities that confirmed the isolation of the regime of Bashar al-Assad that can be seen everywhere. And I'd like to pay tribute to the work that you have done with your colleagues and take this opportunity at this meeting to once again call upon our council to express its full confidence in Mr. Brahimi for a mission which quite clearly is very difficult. And the last point I would like to stress, as other colleagues have done, is that it's not possible to deal with issues that relate to the Arab world and the world in general without underscoring the stalemate in the peace process between Israel and Palestine. France would like to see a resumption of the peace negotiations. We would encourage the parties to take up those negotiations once again. The objective must be, once again, the creation of an independent Palestinian state that is viable and peaceful, and that we guarantee the security of Israel. But here, I would point out that for years, those of us that have followed this issue, and basically we knew what the solution was. The problem was to be able to get the parties to agree, and we haven't been able to do that. But today, given developments on the ground, we risk endangering the solution itself, and that risk is an extremely serious one. And once again, I must pay tribute to the work of the League of Arab States in their attempts to solve the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Solutions must be found for the financial difficulties of the Palestinian Authority and in order for progress to be made. And let me add once again that there can be no lasting peace without justice, and there will be no lasting peace in this region of the world if we, each of us, do not provide a solution to this problem that has gone on for decades. Once again, I'd like to thank my friend Guido Westerwelle for having taken the initiative of organizing this meeting. It enables us to reaffirm the importance that we attach to the work of the League of Arab States, and enables us to express the wish that the United Nations and the League of Arab States will work increasingly and better together with determination and success.
I thank His Excellency Minister Fabius for his statement, and I give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Hillary Rodham Clinton, Secretary of State of the United States of America.
Thank you very much, Minister Westerwelle, for calling us together at this critical moment to discuss peace and security in the Middle East on the heels of 2 tumultuous weeks during which violent protests rocked countries across the region. And although anger was directed against my country, the protests exposed deep rifts within new democracies and volatility that extremists were quick to instigate and exploit. As President Obama made clear yesterday in his address to the General Assembly, the United States rejects the false choice between democracy and stability. Democracies make the strongest, most capable partners, and we know that it takes a lot of hard work and oftentimes struggle. But the fact of new emerging democracies here in the 21st century should be a cause for great satisfaction and hope. But these emerging democracies need champions, not fair-weather friends. And during this past week, as I met with leaders from Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Yemen, I express to each of them America's unwavering support for their country's continued journey along the democratic path. But making good on the promise of these transitions will take many hands working on many fronts. And of course, there are political and economic dimensions to the work that must be done. But today I'd like to focus on the security concerns because that has to be the starting line on the road to true democracy. Of course, the Arab revolutions come from within, and the greatest responsibility for their success or failure lies with the people living them each day. But the nations gathered in this room also have a powerful stake in seeing that these democracies succeed, and it is our shared responsibility to help countries in transition find the right path forward. International support is critical. Consider what happened when the Arab League and the Security Council came together to protect civilians in Libya. That show of solidarity helped produce a strong Security Council resolution that saved Benghazi from destruction at the hands of a tyrant. And thanks to the support of this broad coalition, the people of Libya now have the chance to write their own future. We saw earlier this year Libyans turning out in droves to cast their ballots, most for the first time in their lives. Then last Friday, we saw thousands of Libyans pour into the streets to condemn the attack on the U.S. diplomatic post in Benghazi that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. They made it clear that those who would promote violence and division do not speak for the new Libya, and that armed bands who would sever Libya's ties with the world are not welcome. And the new government of Libya is working closely with us to find the murderers and bring them to justice. Now, each country in transition has its own security challenges, and therefore each need our support in different ways. In Tunisia, where the Arab awakening began, extremists seek to hijack its progress. But Tunisians are working steadily to dismantle a long legacy of dictatorship and lay the foundation for sustainable democracy. The riots underscored the challenges of building security forces focused on protecting people, not regimes. These nations are not the first to struggle with the challenge of policing a new democracy, and the international community has stumbled in the past, failing to offer needed support or offering the wrong kind of support. So we should heed the lessons we have learned from our success and our failure, including this most basic understanding. Training, funding, and equipment will only go so far. It takes the political will to make hard choices and tough changes that will build strong institutions and lasting security. So I'm pleased Tunisia has agreed to host a new international training center that will help security and criminal justice officials pursue policies grounded in the rule of law and human rights. Now, Egyptians chose their leadership for the first time in history, and we are committed to helping that transition succeed. The Egyptian people, proud of the freedoms they have claimed, must decide what kind of a country they want to build. And the choices of the largest Arab nation will echo far beyond its borders. And like all nations, Egypt knows it too has responsibilities not only to its own citizens, but to its neighbors and the international community. Responsibilities to honor international commitments, to share power broadly, to keep faith with all the Egyptian people, men and women, Muslim and Christian, and we want to help Egypt and all new democracies live up to these vital responsibilities. In Yemen, we are working through the GCC-led transition process, but providing basic security for the Yemeni people is a great challenge that is heightened by Yemen's unique needs. Yemen has a fast-growing population of young people and not enough jobs, a familiar story not only through the region but the world. But in addition, Yemen is facing the depletion of their oil and water supplies, and al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula remains a serious threat. The urgency of these threats must be matched by the urgency of our response. In the Friends of Yemen meeting later this week, countries are coming together to address Yemen's challenges, both in the immediate and long term. Unfortunately, in Syria, Bashar al-Assad clings to power, and his campaign of brutality has sparked a humanitarian crisis. The United States has committed more than $100 million to help the Syrian people, and we continue to insist that the violence must end and a political transition without Assad must move forward. The Arab League suspended Syria from its activities and has strongly condemned the Assad regime's brutal violence against its own people. And the Arab League created a plan for peaceful political transition that was endorsed by an overwhelming majority in the General Assembly resolution that launched Arab League UN mediation efforts led first by Kofi Annan and now by Lakhdar Brahimi. Yet the atrocities mount while the Security Council remains paralyzed. And I would urge that we try once again to find a path forward that can bring the Security Council together on the urgent business of both ending the violence in Syria and preventing the consequences that all of us around this table fear. And although this forum was not primarily intended to discuss the peace process, I certainly would like to reiterate the President's message from yesterday. The future of Israel and Palestine must belong to those who embrace the hard work of peace, not those who thrive on conflict or reject the right of Israel to exist. And the United States stands ready and prepared to work toward a just agreement to finally accomplish our clear goal: a secure Jewish state of Israel, an independent, secure, prosperous Palestine, fulfilling the aspirations of the Palestinian people. No discussion of the Middle East would be complete without a mention of Iran and the profound threat its activities pose to the region and beyond. Despite numerous demands by this Council, Iran still has not taken the necessary steps to cooperate fully with the IAEA and to resolve doubts about its nuclear program. In addition, Iran continues to sponsor terrorist groups and smuggle weapons for the Assad regime's use against the Syrian people. Meanwhile, the Iranian people themselves suffer gross violation of their rights at the hand of their own government. Serious challenges like these call for leadership and partnership. Yesterday, I was privileged to sign an agreement with the Arab League through its Secretary General. And I was delighted that Secretary General El Arabi and I could build on the unprecedented cooperation of the last 2 years. We support Germany's call to make Security Council Arab League cooperation more systemic and sustainable. The United States is also one of 28 countries and international organizations working through the Deauville Partnership to support democratic transitions in the Middle East and North Africa. When violence came to our doorstep at embassies around the globe, this body joined the Arab League, the OIC, the AU, and the EU to give voice to the world's condemnation of the attacks and call for restraint. You stood with us, and now we must stand together in support of the common aspirations of the people, of all people, for security and safety for our families, the freedom to live lives according to our own conscience, the dignity that comes only through self-determination. And as President Obama said yesterday, the United States will never shrink from defending these values, and we will not walk away from these new democracies. We are not alone in this commitment. This is the work of all responsible nations, and we look forward to working closely with anyone who speaks out on behalf of our shared values. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Secretary Clinton for her statement, and I give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Maite Nokoana Mashabane, Minister for International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa.
Thank you. South Africa expresses its appreciation to Germany, particularly to our colleague, Minister Guido Westerwelle, for organizing this timely debate, which provides an opportunity for us to reflect on the peace and security situation in the Middle East, especially in the light of current events taking place in the region. We thank Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Nabil El-Arabi, for their respective statements. The Charter gives the Security Council the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and it also recognizes the complementarity role between the UN and regional organizations. Political and strategic alignment between the Security Council and regional organizations has demonstrated effective results, as we have seen in the cases of Somalia and Sudan. Coordination should be enhanced and become more formalized and structured, which is why South Africa has consistently championed strengthening of cooperation between United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations. We also, again, pioneered the adoption of Resolution 2033 earlier this year to further strengthen this relationship, particularly between the AU Peace and Security Council and the United Nations Security Council. Cooperation between regional organizations is equally important, especially in instances where there is overlapping membership, such as in the case with the League of Arab States and the African Union. In such situations, regional organizations should collaborate in developing cross-regional solutions to common challenges, such as resolution of conflicts. In this regard, we look forward to the joint consultative ministerial meeting between the AU Peace and Security Council and the League of Arab States Peace and Security Council, scheduled to take place in New York on the 27th September 2012. Mr. President, in the case of the Middle East, we have to recognize that the League of Arab States is the organization best placed to have a deeper appreciation of the dynamics within which conflicts in the Arab world take place and can provide context-specific solutions. South Africa appreciates the efforts of the League in promoting peace in the Middle East region, especially efforts at furthering Middle East peace process, the oldest peace and security item on the agenda of both the UN and the League. It is therefore apt that the UN is strengthening its engagement with the League. The appointment of the Joint Special Representative of Syria, for Syria is demonstrative of this concrete cooperation. It would also be appropriate for the Secretary General, in consultation with the League, to explore modalities for further enhancing cooperation. In its cooperation with the League, the Council should be consistent and not selectively cooperate on matters that serve the national interests of some of its members. Mr. President, the events in the Middle East over the past 19 months have had a significant impact in the region and the rest of the world. The complicities underlying this event underscore that no individual country or organization can address these developments on their own. The need for cooperation among states and international organizations when dealing with cross-cutting issues of peace, security, and development is therefore paramount. Equally, the underlying causes of these uprisings, including long-standing conflicts, have to be addressed in a coordinated manner. In the Middle East, we have not seen such an approach. There has been swift international reaction to some, while in others, this cooperation is lacking, and as a result, there has not been a significant movement towards resolving this conflict. Cooperation between the UN and the League on the Middle East peace process has been most disappointing. The Arab League has consistently played a significant role in trying to find a resolution to the conflict, including by the adoption of the Arab Peace Initiative. Unfortunately, this Security Council is yet to provide effective and meaningful support to the League's efforts. Instead, we have relied on the Middle East Quartet, whose efficacy is increasingly being questioned, especially because its composition excludes the League or regional representatives. Exactly 1 year ago, in September 2011, the Middle East Quartet committed itself to the resumption of the direct negotiations between Israel and Palestine by September this year. This deadline has come and gone with no significant progress towards the resumption of talks. As a result, the situation in the occupied Palestine territories continues to deteriorate sharply. Illegal settlements construction, which violates the international law and the resolution of this Council, remains a major stumbling block to the viability of an independent Palestinian state and the resumption of the peace talks. South Africa laments the failure of this Council to agree to the admission of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, despite the overwhelming support and endorsement by the League. We welcome the Arab League's decision to revive Palestine's bid for UN membership and call on the international community to provide support to a permanent and sustainable political solution, namely the implementation of the two-state solution, providing for the establishment of a viable Palestinian state existing side by side in peace with Israel within the internationally recognized borders based on those existing on the 4th of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Regrettably, years of failed diplomacy and oversight by the UN Security Council has resulted only in hardening of positions by the occupier, increased abject poverty and suffering by the people of Palestine, and continued insecurity for both the people of Israel and Palestine. Perhaps it is time to consider a new approach. The League is well placed to take the lead and to ensure that Palestine's cause again become a priority of the Council. Mr. President, with regard to the situation in Syria, we condemn the ongoing violence that continues unabated. Meanwhile, the Security Council remains divided on this issue. South Africa emphasizes that the Security Council and the League of Arab States should address the Syrian crisis in a balanced manner by applying pressure on all sides to stop the violence and stop it immediately, to establish a ceasefire and comply fully with their respective obligations under the six-point plan and the Geneva Action Group communique. Those assisting either parties militarily are worsening the situation and prolonging the bloodshed. We call on those involved in such initiatives to refrain from them and assist in the efforts to bring the parties to the negotiating table in order to launch a credible Syrian-led and owned political process that will lead to a legitimate transitional arrangement aimed at establishing a democratic, pluralistic society that meets the legitimate aspirations of all the Syrian people. The resolution of conflict should also preserve the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria. In conclusion, Mr. President, the inability of this Council to deal with the situation in Palestine and in Syria underscores the need for the reform of this Council. The absence of reform renders cooperation with regional organizations vitally important as this unreformed Council attempts to grapple with contemporary threats to international peace and security. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Minister Nkoame Mashabane for her statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sergei Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join with the words of appreciation that I've expressed to you for convening this meeting on a very important subject. The Arab world is living through radical and painful transformations. Their impact is already being felt and will be felt for quite a long time, both in the region and globally. of special concern are the attempts to instigate interethnic and interreligious discord on a global scale. It is necessary to put a barrier in the way of those who insult the feelings of the believers and set people of different religions against each other. It is equally unacceptable to respond to provocations with terror, which cannot have any justification, especially when diplomats and UN personnel are attacked. The process of changes is caused by the aspirations of peoples to a better life and justice, and the desire to realize their political rights and freedoms. We share and understand these feelings. They are in line with the philosophy of Russian foreign policy, based on the assumption that all peoples are to determine their own destiny independently. The developments in the Middle East and North Africa confirm once again the need to respect the key principles of the UN Charter. Above all, sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, non-interference in their domestic affairs, and the non-use or threat of force. Speaking today at the Kremlin, President Vladimir Putin emphasized that the primacy of international law must be ensured in the international arena and within states. The path to a solid solution to these problems is through an extensive dialogue and achievement of national reconciliation. Today, the strife that overflows the Arab world is concentrated in the situation in Syria. We condemn any violent acts, any violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, whoever is the perpetrator, the government of Syria or the armed opposition. However, a significant share of responsibility for the continuing bloodshed rests upon the states that instigate the opponents of Bashar al-Assad to reject the ceasefire and dialogue, and at the same time to demand unconditional capitulation of the regime. Such an approach is unrealistic, and in fact it encourages terrorist methods that the armed opposition is using more and more often. The refusal by some members of the Security Council to condemn these terrorist acts is of deep concern, and it calls into question the fundamental line of the Security Council to counter terrorism in any manifestations. There are no doubts that military methods, let alone outside military interference, are fraught with serious threats to regional security with unpredictable consequences. A sustainable settlement can be achieved only through negotiations and a search for compromises that take into account the interests of all religious and ethnic groups of Syrian society. There is a basis for achieving this goal. The communiqué of the Action Group, endorsed in Geneva on June 30th as a follow-up to UN Security Council resolutions 2042 and 2043 and the Kofi Annan Plan. This communiqué reflects a consensus reached among all Security Council permanent members, the League of Arab States, Turkey, the European Union, and the UN Secretary General. We strongly believe that the Geneva communiqué is still appropriate and relevant. We would like in this connection to draw attention to the fact that the document was adopted today by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the BRIC countries, which is assessment of the situation in Syria, and it expressed support for the Geneva communiqué as a basis for such activities. This is a basis for achieving consensus in the UN Security Council. This is something that some of our colleagues have talked about, the lack of this consensus. This Geneva Convention communiqué is the most realistic basis for such a consensus, and especially because all of the permanent members of the Security Council signed the Geneva communiqué. We hope that this document will also help Lakhdar Brahimi and his team to explore the ways to overcome the crisis. We will provide necessary assistance to their efforts, and we will welcome other constructive proposals to promote coordinated efforts of the international community that could compel all Syrian parties to put an end to violence and come to the negotiation table. In this context, we see some potential in the initiative of the President of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi. Today, as never before, many problems have been accumulated on the political map of the Middle East. So far, no significant progress has been made in addressing them. There's no doubt that the political transformations that have been launched must be carried out to their logical end, taking into account the opinions of all groups of society in order to prevent the recurrence of turmoil. It is also clear that without modernization of the economy and social sphere, it is hardly possible to make the Arab peoples feel the changes for the better and acquire immunity to extremism. One of the resources to be explored along these lines is a responsible and targeted assistance from the international community. It is essential for all outside players to provide help in strengthening positive processes in the Arab world, including through such mechanisms as the Deauville Partnership. Interaction with the members of the League of Arab States is among the strategic priorities of Russia's foreign policy. Russia has never had any colonial interests in the Middle East and North Africa, and never unleashed wars for resources there, or imposed its configuration of the political map of the region. From the very beginning, our presence there was aimed at promoting communication among nations and coexistence of various cultures and religions, generally what is now called the Dialogue of Civilizations. Based on many years of friendship and partnership between Russia and the countries of the Arab world, today we are promoting equitable and mutually respectful dialogue on the whole range of regional problems and negotiating new forms of interaction. The Russian-Arab Cooperation Forum has been established as a framework for implementing projects in trade and the economy, cultural and humanitarian spheres. The Russian-Arab Business Council has been launched also. We believe that the League of Arab States is called upon to play a tangible role in overcoming the challenges confronted by the Middle East and North Africa. It has at its disposal a thorough knowledge of national psychology, traditions, and historic experience, and the capacity to formulate common goals for the region. The efficiency of the League will significantly increase if it builds its anti-crisis measures based on the priority of dialogue, mediation, and peacekeeping, as is required by the UN Charter. Generally, we believe it is essential to strengthen thorough coordination of the League of Arab States' efforts with the United Nations. We share a common position with the League of Arab States and its member states that despite the dramatic nature of the Arab Spring, these processes should not preclude the search for ways to settle the long-standing problems in the Middle East. First of all, this concerns the task of achieving a just settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict on the existing international legal basis. That, as we know, includes the Arab Peace Initiative, adopted at the League of Arab States Summit in Beirut in March 2002, and is supported by the UN Security Council. Russia strongly calls for intensified efforts by the Middle East Quartet mediators in close cooperation with the League of Arab States towards an early resumption of the Palestinian-Israeli talks. We believe it is a serious mistake that the Quartet was unable to hold a ministerial meeting on the margins of the general political debate during the current UN General Assembly session. The recent outbreak of tension in the region, the attacks against foreign embassies in a number of countries, and the loss of life of American diplomats in Libya have confirmed once again the need for an uncompromised fight against terrorism. It is essential that the terrorists who are attempting to turn to their favor the process of transformation should be unanimously repulsed by the international community everywhere, in Libya, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. There should be no double standards. And in doing so, all states without exception should ensure careful and respectful treatment of the historical, cultural, and religious values of all the peoples, and suppress insults to the feelings of believers. The most important task is to prevent the proliferation of new threats emerging in the shadow of today's transformation processes. Radicalization of the public mood, instigation of interreligious and interconfessional clashes, growth in the uncontrolled traffic of drugs, weapons, and militants. A significant added value could be created by the establishment of a zone free of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery in the Middle East. And this is something that the Secretary General of the League of Arab States talked about, Nabil El-Arabi. Russia will continue to promote the earliest implementation of this important initiative and support the efforts of countries of the region and the League of Arab States, which naturally should play a leading role in convening a conference on this issue. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Minister Lavrov for his statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Harold Caballeros, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guatemala.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank your government for having organized this ministerial debate and express my gratitude to the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States, Nabil El-Arabi, for their respective interventions. Mr. President, I am pleased to participate once again in a debate of this Council, especially when addressing such a relevant topic as the one that you have proposed. This topic, in essence, has two components to it. The first relates to peace and security in the Middle East, while the second pertains more to the evolution in the application of Chapter 8 of the Charter, in this case, the relationship between this Council and the League of Arab States. On the first aspect, our delegation has spoken on multiple occasions on this matter in the Chamber. Therefore, our positions on various specific matters, such as the situation in Syria, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, the situations in Lebanon and Yemen, as well as the so-called Arab Spring, are well known. We have also expressed our concerns over the inherent risks of nuclear programs being developed in some countries of the region with the possibility of its use for military purposes. The International Atomic Energy Agency has an essential role to play in the elimination of this risk. This being said, and despite the worrying developments of recent weeks that hold the potential to destabilize even more a situation that is inherently vulnerable, we applaud, in general, the changes occurring in the Middle East, since they emanate from the grassroots of society and pursue universal goals that we can all share, such as freedom, justice, dignity, and greater well-being for all. My own region, Central America, and my own country, Guatemala, underwent important transitions in the 1980s and 1990s of the last century. The Guatemalan peace accords posited a more democratic and tolerant society, respectful of human rights, with greater opportunities for all, and subject to the rule of law. For over 25 years, we have strived to meet these objectives, with very important achievements, but still with some lacunae and shortcomings. We know how difficult it is to foster change, but we persist in this endeavor regarding our own country. Of course, we desire the same for those nations in the Middle East that have launched processes that seek more democratic, participative and inclusive systems of government. In Latin America, we have seen that freely elected governments tend to resolve their differences, if they have them, with their neighbors peacefully and through negotiations. That is an important and encouraging lesson for our friends in the Middle East. And another lesson is that the intensity of potential conflicts diminishes when the economies offer greater economic opportunities to the population. Therefore, we believe that democracy, development, justice and peace go hand in hand. Mr. President, one additional lesson is relevant to our debate today, and it relates to the second area that I referred to. We value the role played by regional and sub-regional organizations. In our part of the world, we have over 60 years of experience in benefiting from the institutions of Central American integration to forge a regional economic area and create the basis for a political union. This is why we have supported the increasingly broad alliances which the Security Council has built with regional entities and sub-regional entities both in Africa and the Middle East. We applaud the presence of the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States in this meeting, whose partnership role in addressing the challenges of the Middle East is increasingly significant. And we hope that this role will deepen and broaden in the future without in any way diminishing the exclusive purview of this Council. In cementing that partnership, you can count on the support of Guatemala. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Minister Caballeros for his statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Yang Jiechi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China.
Mr. President, I'm glad to attend the high-level meeting of the Security Council on Peace and Security in the Middle East. And it is good to see you, Minister Guaito Westermer, chair the meeting. The Middle East is undergoing unprecedented changes. The political, economic, and social impact of the international financial crisis on this region is unfolding. People in the region have shown a stronger desire to run their affairs independently and seek change. Some countries are in a state of turmoil, while some others have entered a critical stage of political transition and transformation. Regional hotspot issues have become more severe, local conflicts have increased, and extremist and terrorist forces have intensified their infiltration efforts. Traditional and non-traditional security issues are entwined, exerting a greater impact on the region. In short, the situation in the Middle East has become more complex and fragile and has attracted wide attention from the international community. Peace, stability, and development in the Middle East represent the shared aspiration of all people in the region and serve the common interests of the entire international community. Middle East affairs should be addressed mainly by people in the region, and the future and destiny of the region should be held in the hands of its own people. The international community should respect the aspirations and cause of the people in the region for change and development, respect distinctive religious and cultural features of the region, pay attention to the voice of countries and people in the region on issues related to the Middle East, and urge the parties concerned to work out appropriate solutions through inclusive political processes and strike a right balance between reform, stability, and development in order to achieve durable peace and common prosperity. The Palestinian issue remains at the core of the Middle East issue. With drastic changes in the regional landscape, it is all the more imperative for the international community to recognize the importance and urgency of relaunching peace talks between Palestine and Israel. The international community should adopt a more active and constructive stance to promote peace talks and urge both the Palestinians and Israelis to take concrete steps to remove obstacles to peace talks, rebuild mutual trust, resume talks, and make substantive progress at an early date. Israel should undertake the responsibility of taking the first step. China supports the Palestinian people in establishing, on the basis of the 1967 borders, an independent Palestinian state that enjoys full sovereignty with East Jerusalem as its capital. We support Palestine's membership in the United Nations and other international organizations. The Syrian issue concerns not only the future and destiny of Syria and its people, but also overall peace and stability in the Middle East. The crisis in Syria remains unresolved, and the situation is worrying. In the face of the complex and grave situation, the international community must have even stronger faith in peace and stay on the right track of seeking a political solution. We should support Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, the UN Arab League Joint Special Representative, in conducting impartial mediation and urge all parties in Syria to earnestly implement relevant Security Council resolutions. Mr. Kofi Annan's six-point plan and the communiqué of the Foreign Ministers' meeting of the Action Group for Syria put an immediate end to fighting and violence, protect civilians, and create conditions for a Syrian-led political transition. As a permanent member of the Security Council, China has faithfully fulfilled its obligations and acted as a positive force in seeking a political solution to the issue. China is ready to join the rest of the international community in an unremitting effort to resolve the Syrian issue in a just, peaceful, and appropriate way. The Iranian nuclear issue has a significant bearing on the development of the situation in the Middle East. China opposes development and possession of nuclear weapons by any country in the Middle East. At the same time, we believe that the international community should respect the right of a country to peaceful use of nuclear energy. China maintains that dialogue and cooperation is the only right way to address the Iranian nuclear issue, and it is ill-advised to resort to force or unilateral sanctions. The parties concerned should have firm confidence and remain committed to a diplomatic solution, and at the same time be flexible and pragmatic, seek common ground while overcoming differences, work for early progress in dialogue and negotiations, and over time achieve a comprehensive, long-term and proper solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. Mr. President, peace, stability, and development of the Middle East would not be possible without the support and assistance of regional and international organizations. The UN Charter entrusts the Security Council with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. At the same time, in Chapter 8 of the Charter of the United Nations, the founders of the United Nations also encouraged pacific settlement of local disputes through regional arrangements. The League of Arab States is an important multilateral organization in the Middle East. Over the years, it has played an active role in upholding the lawful rights and interests of the Arab people, enhancing solidarity among Arab states, and promoting peace and stability in the region and beyond. Under the current circumstances, it is of both practical significance and far-reaching strategic importance for the UN and the Arab League to step up communication and cooperation and jointly safeguard peace, stability, and development in the Middle East. Closer cooperation between the UN and the Arab League should be based on the purposes and principles of the Charter. The principles enshrined in the Charter, including sovereign equality and non-interference in each other's internal affairs, constitute basic norms governing international relations and important guidelines for addressing hotspot issues. In carrying out cooperation, the UN and the Arab League should aim to uphold these principles, safeguard the fundamental and long-term interest of the people of all countries in the Middle East, and maintain peace and stability in the region. Closer cooperation between the UN and the Arab League should focus on peaceful settlement of disputes. History has shown time and again that settling disputes through such diplomatic means as dialogue and negotiation is the only right and effective way to achieve durable peace. As a regional organization, the Arab League has a unique and important role to play in encouraging countries in the region to settle disputes through mediation, negotiation, good offices, and other peaceful means. The UN should encourage the Arab League to keep to the course of political settlement, build consensus, and coordinate the efforts of countries in the region in order to ease the situation and achieve peace and stability. Closer cooperation between the UN and Arab League should follow a holistic approach. This is of crucial importance. The causes of turbulence and conflicts in the Middle East are mostly related to people's livelihood and ethnic and religious factors. The UN and the Arab League should pay more attention and give more support to economic and social development in the region, help the region achieve development and improve people's lives, and encourage different ethnic groups and religions to show mutual tolerance, achieve reconciliation, and live in harmony so as to remove the economic and social breeding ground for turbulence and extremist thinking. Mr. President, China is a good friend and good partner of the Arab countries and people. We firmly support and help promote their just cause. On issues of peace and security in the Middle East, China has always fulfilled its obligations in a constructive way. We stand for peace and oppose war. We stand for equality and oppose power politics. We stand for principles and oppose interference. And we stand for dialogue and oppose confrontation. Bearing in mind the fundamental and long-term interest of the people in the Middle East, China has made its own efforts to advance peace, stability, and development in the region. China will, as always, take a constructive part in the mediation and settlement of the hotspot issues in the Middle East, support the UN and its Security Council in continuing to play an important role in addressing the Middle East issue, and help put this region on a path of peace, stability, economic prosperity, and social progress at an early date. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Minister Yang for his statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Elmar Mahram Oglu Mamayedarov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much, Guido. Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to join my voice and congratulate Germany for its successful presidency of the Security Council this month, and thank you for convening this meeting absolutely within the timely topic. We're also grateful to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Nabil El-Arabi, for their briefings. Today's meeting is taking place in an important period in the sense that the Middle Eastern region experiences historic changes that testifies to the desire and determination of the societies to shape their destiny. The transformation process have yielded encouraging trends toward ensuring respect for human rights and guaranteeing economic and social well-being for everyone. At the same time, there is an obvious need for in-depth analysis into the root causes and eventually implications of this complex process for regional and global security architecture. While international response to those developments in the Middle East was varied in its essence and intensity, the primary role in maintaining adequate international reaction belongs to international regional organizations, particularly to the United Nations and the League of Arab States. It should be noted that not all regional organizations may boast of their ability and political will to understand the root causes of the security problems and to contribute effectively to their resolution. The League of Arab States has proved to be one of those regional organizations that are able to take the lead in promoting peace, security, and stability in the region. In that regard, we were pleased to see that the cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States was motivated by the common objective of enhancing peace and security and helping the states of the region through this difficult period of their history. Their participation and presence have been instrumental in carrying out important tasks in such areas as conflict prevention and resolution, crisis response and management, fight against terrorism and organized crime. Against the background of the regional fragilities and go hand in hand with the challenges of the transformations experienced in the region, maintaining high profile and further active involvement by the United Nations and the League of Arab States have acquired increased importance. Therefore, mutually reinforcing cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States has become ever more essential for maintaining peace and security in the region and working out sound strategies to assist the states in transition. The role of the League of Arab States as an insider to the region is particularly valuable in terms of bringing out the regional specificities, difficult to pronounce, to the global scale and interacting with the United Nations, its specialized agencies and field presence. The United Nations and the League of Arab States should further galvanize their efforts for the achievement of best results for the states and people of the region. In that regard, we commend the appointment of the Joint Special Representative for Syria of the United Nations and the League of the Arab States as an important step forward in the cooperation between the two organizations and reiterate our full support for his activity. Mr. President, the international community must continue to be consistent in its efforts to facilitate solutions to the regional crisis and conflicts, based on the norms and principles of international law, as well as on the relevant resolutions of the United Nations Security Council as required by the United Nations Charter. This approach is strongly supported by Azerbaijan with regard to the resolution of protracted conflicts in different parts of the world. While recognizing historic opportunities that recent waves of transitions bring about for the Middle East, we should not neglect the long-standing security problems, solution to which is no less important prerequisite for maintaining peace, stability, and sustainable development in the region. All stakeholders in the Middle East should regard the latest developments as a unique chance and an urgent call to make courageous steps for achievement tangible results in the Middle East peace process. The comprehensive, just, and lasting settlement is long overdue in this conflict, which undermines the security, stability, and well-being of the entire region, and has an impact that stretches well beyond the regional boundaries. We consider it essential of having cooperation between the Security Council and the League of Arab States on this issue of paramount importance for all of us. We cannot but once again express our deep concern over the recent escalation provoked by blasphemy against Islam. We strongly condemn all assaults against religions. At the same time, attacks on the civilians, in particular diplomatic personnel, cannot be justified under any circumstances. Mr. President, we truly would like to believe that irrespective of all the challenges and difficulties, the pursuit of peace and progress in the Middle East will never be abandoned, and endeavors of its peoples to build stable, secure, and democratic states will be continuously bolstered by the international community. In this context, we are confident that the continued engagement by the United Nations and the League of Arab States and the strengthening cooperation between them, consistent with Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, will effectively contribute to peace and security in the region. As a member of Security Council and observer to the League of Arab States, Azerbaijan will continue its utmost efforts to that end. In conclusion, I would like to express our full support of the draft Security Council presidential statement aimed at helping develop effective cooperation between the two organizations. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Minister Mamadiyarov for his statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. William Hague, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
I too thank the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States for their words, and I'm grateful to you, Mr. President, for proposing this debate on peace and security in the Middle East. Over the past 18 months, the Arab Spring, as we've come to call it, has taken a different path in each country of the region. In some countries, revolutions have been relatively swift. In Syria, as we know, horrifying violence continues to engulf the country, almost a year and a half since protests began. In other countries, peaceful reform is underway. We respect the right of each country in the region to find its own path to reform, based on their different cultures and traditions. But we will always stand up for our belief in the universality of human rights and freedom that is at the heart of democracy. Indeed, this historic change has been driven by the people of the region demanding the greater political and economic freedom that is their legitimate right. History has shown that those governments that draw their legitimacy from the consent of their people are best placed to deliver lasting peace and security. Where the social contract between citizen and state is based on trust and accountability, societies are able to flower. Where they are based on fear, violence, and the denial of rights, conflict and insecurity arise. That is why the Arab Spring is a moment of huge opportunity to build peace, security, and prosperity for the region and, by extension, the world. Alongside open, inclusive national structures, lasting peace and security also relies upon effective international and regional institutions. That is a lesson we ourselves have learnt the hard way, reflected in the very history of how this body was created. And over the past 18 months, the League of Arab States has shown resolve and perseverance in working to achieve regional security and stability. I warmly commend the clear leadership they have demonstrated. They were decisive in calling for a no-fly zone in Libya. They have taken a lead in responding to the Syrian crisis, including efforts to mediate between the Syrian opposition and regime, as well as to apply political, economic and diplomatic pressure on the regime to end the violence. The decision to appoint a joint UN Arab League Special Representative for Syria is a clear indication of the growing positive cooperation between the UN and the Arab League. We strongly support the work of Lakhdar Brahimi, and we will do our utmost to support his efforts to resolve the crisis in Syria, just as we supported his predecessor Kofi Annan. I fully support efforts to strengthen further the relationship between the United Nations and the League of Arab States, and welcome the deepening of cooperation between these two bodies. This is important as there are urgent challenges at hand for which the UN and the League of Arab States bear a shared responsibility. As the Syrian crisis continues to deepen, the risk of broader regional instability and conflict increases. Addressing such crises is exactly what the UN Security Council exists to do. That the Security Council has failed to act on its clear responsibilities in the case of Syria is inexcusable and shocking, as Laurent Fabius has earlier said. It is a terrible indictment of the Council that over 22,000 people have died since it first failed to agree a resolution to stem the violence. It is long past the time for the Council to use its collective weight to require the Syrian regime to end the violence and to impose serious consequences if it does not. On the Middle East peace process, I am also deeply concerned by developments on the ground, including continued settlement activity. And I call on both sides to avoid steps that undermine the prospects of peace and to resume direct talks. We've long been clear that a Palestinian state is a legitimate goal, and the best way of achieving this is through a comprehensive agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. We want to see a solution to this conflict that gives the Palestinian people the state that they need and deserve, and the Israeli people long-term security and peace. Without this, lasting peace and security in the region will remain elusive. It is remarkable how much has been achieved in the Middle East and North Africa since the Arab Spring began. In Libya, Egypt and Tunisia, citizens have voted in free elections for the first time in decades. Change has been led by the people of the region, and it is not for anyone else to impose their vision on the region. However, there is a crucial role for the international community to play in supporting peaceful reform. The United Kingdom is doing this through our Arab Partnership by providing diplomatic and practical support to strengthen the political and economic participation of citizens in the Middle East and North Africa. We must act together to ensure that hard-won freedoms and rights are protected, and that those still fighting for their legitimate rights receive our support, laying the foundations for lasting peace and security in the region. We must continue to work to ensure that the United Nations acts as a bridge for effective international cooperation to provide this support to the region. The people of the region deserve this from us, and we must not fail them. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Secretary Haig for his statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Maria Angela Holguin Correa, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Colombia.
Me uno a las felicitaciones.
I would like to join in the congratulations to Germany on your presidency of the Council, and to you, Minister, for having organised this meeting. I'd also like to thank the Secretary-General of the United Nations and the Secretary-General of the League of Arab States for their presentations. The work of regional organisations in the search for solutions to situations on the agenda of the Security Council is of the greatest importance. We all have in mind the work of the League of Arab States in the case of Libya and the Gulf Cooperation Council in the case of Yemen. Regional organisations are without a doubt the ones with the greatest knowledge of the situations in their regions. The Middle East, Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa face great security challenges. Cooperation with regional bodies such as the League of Arab States, the Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS and others are of the utmost importance in achieving lasting solutions that also address the concerns of each region. The Council should promote close cooperation with regional organisations, giving priority to strategies aimed at conflict prevention, mediation and good offices. Regional organizations have a privileged position, unique access to key stakeholders, exceptional knowledge and experience with regard to the diverse situation in their regions, and thus the importance of their participation as strategic partners to carry out actions that fit the particular situation and needs of each case under consideration. Nevertheless, it is important to guarantee that the work of the Security Council and the regional organizations be convergent. Mr. President, the concept document asks us the question of how to strengthen cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States in particular. In this regard, I believe that the holding of annual evaluation meetings, like the one that currently takes place with the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, could be beneficial, including the dialogue on conflict prevention. Cooperation between the Security Council and the League of Arab States can and must be strengthened in order to confront the security challenges in the Middle East. The appointment of Kofi Annan as Joint Special Envoy of the United Nations and the League of Arab States a few months ago, and more recently of Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi as Joint Special Representative, are good examples of this cooperation. Mr. President, I would like to once again condemn the attack in Libya, in Benghazi, on the American embassy that led to the death of Ambassador Stevens and others. We cannot allow extremism and terrorism to demean human life. Tolerance and the respect for cultural, religious, political and economic diversity must take priority in global action. I would like to refer to the situation now in Syria. The Syrian crisis constitutes a threat to peace in the Middle East, a region that has faced precarious security conditions for more than a year now. We therefore deplore the inactivity of the Council to stop the violence and the bloodshed and to facilitate a peaceful solution. In this regard, we must point out that this Council has not been able to reach agreement to meet its responsibilities entrusted to it by all United Nations members. The humanitarian situation is alarming, as we discussed a few weeks ago in this very chamber. We share the concerns regarding the increasing flow of refugees towards neighboring countries, and we want to recognize in particular today the efforts of Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan and Iraq, who have taken in hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees in the past months. The Syrian people have also suffered from internal displacement, destruction of their homes and infrastructure. We must redouble our efforts to find a negotiated political solution to this crisis, which is becoming more and more urgent by the day. I would like to take this opportunity to urge all parties in Syria to immediately put an end to force and violence and respect human rights. I would call upon all parties to respect international humanitarian law. Though the primary responsibility to guarantee the respect for and the protection of individual rights and fundamental freedoms of the population, including the right to life and the freedom of expression and association, lies with the Syrian authorities, all parties involved are obliged to comply with the norms of international humanitarian law. Mr. President, despite the turbulences going through the region at the moment, the search for a lasting, integral solution to the Middle East crisis cannot be avoided. This is essential to the whole region. As in this, as other cases, we must benefit from the comparative advantage of the League of Arab States to overcome existing obstacles and for renewing negotiations on the establishment of a Palestinian state living in peace with Israel, with sure and defined borders, and that this will be the outcome of an agreement that can guarantee coexistence of the two nations, respecting humanitarian law, and this can only be achieved by a return to the negotiations. We promote dialogue as a way for peace and prosperity, but as a matter of urgency, we will continue to put forward this point of view in this Council. We support the presidential statement that refers to effective cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. Thank you very much.
Thank Her Excellency Minister Holguin Guea for her statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Elliot Ohin, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, First of all, I would like to commend the German presidency of the Security Council for organizing this high-level debate on the Middle East in the context of cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States for the maintenance of international peace and security. I would also like to thank the Secretaries General of the United Nations and the League of Arab States for their respective briefings on the situation in the Middle East. Finally, I would like to welcome the presence of my colleagues, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, which bears witness to the importance of the issue that we are considering. Mr. President, cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States dates back to 1950 and is of great importance, in particular, right now, when the international community is facing threats of various types, including armed conflicts, terrorism, humanitarian crises, crises linked to extremism, and to the proliferation of nuclear weapons. The importance of the contribution of regional organizations to the maintenance of international peace and security, as stipulated by the United Nations Charter, no longer needs to be proven. At a time when the seriousness of the conflicts and threats facing the Middle East calls for all available resources, it is important today more than ever to strengthen this cooperation pursuant to Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter. This is not a choice, it is necessary, and this reminds us of the statement made by the former Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Chedli Klibi, during a meeting between the two organizations, which was held in Tunis in 1983. And I quote, "The League would very much like to consolidate and develop ties already created in all areas related to the maintenance of international peace and security, and to cooperate by every means possible in applying resolutions of the United Nations." End of quote. The advantage of the League of Arab States is in being able to bring states together to deal with issues that fall within the remit of the Security Council. And this shows that cooperation with the United Nations is essential and should be strengthened. This cooperation has taken shape in many ways during the Syrian crisis, when the initiatives of the League of Arab States were supported by the United Nations as a whole, and by the Security Council in particular. The appointment of a joint special envoy on the Syrian crisis in February of this year, and the appointment of a joint special representative in August, following the resignation of the special envoy. These are examples which reflect the readiness and the commitment of the Secretaries General of the two organizations to work together to seek a solution to this crisis. The League of Arab States and the United Nations should continue to explore the ways and means to help the Syrian people to end this tragedy, which has already caused some 30,000 deaths and created hundreds of displaced persons and refugees. But this cooperation should go beyond the Syrian crisis to other situations and conflicts in the region where the action of the League of Arab States has not been very visible. It is desirable that the League be more involved in the settlement of all of the crises in the Middle East, not only because this is a recommendation by the United Nations Charter, but also because the League could suggest possible solutions that would take into account the cultural, historic, and sociological ties that exist among parties to conflict. Mr. President, even if cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States has not yet made it possible to find a solution to the Syrian crisis, the fact remains that it constitutes a framework for working together and seeking solutions where the courage and determination of its actors could prove beneficial. My country believes that the two organizations should further pool their efforts for a settlement to this crisis and other conflict situations in the Middle East, such as the conflict in Yemen, in Lebanon, and the nagging question of Palestine. In terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, my delegation would like once again to welcome the Arab Initiative, or the Arab Peace Plan, for a settlement of this conflict. The implementation of this plan could calm tensions in the region, and we urge all of the parties concerned to work with a view to its harmonious implementation. Mr. President, cooperation between the League and the United Nations should be strengthened. Ensuring consistency among initiatives and actions of the two organizations is necessary. This requires, without a doubt, updating knowledge in all areas, and in particular, strengthening the climate of confidence among parties. Because no country and no organization can have all of the capacity necessary to help a country or a region to overcome a crisis. This is the same objective which formed the basis for Security Council Resolution 2033 on cooperation between the United Nations and the African Union. We welcome the meeting that the two organizations held in July in Vienna, when they agreed to strengthen their partnerships in all areas, and in particular with respect to the situation in the Middle East. Likewise, we welcome direct contact, on the one hand, between the Secretaries General of the two organizations, and on the other hand, among the specialized institutions of the League of Arab States and the bodies of the United Nations system. These are all initiatives which show the need for the League of Arab States and the United Nations to develop a promising partnership, one that can provide solutions to the challenges and the transformations which are underway in the Middle East. The development of this cooperation could also take place through the strengthening of the mechanism that emerges from periodic meetings, during which the two organizations regularly evaluate their partnership and seize the occasion to agree on actions to be carried out together to prevent conflicts or to find the appropriate ways and means to find lasting solutions to ongoing crises. Along these lines, my country believes that the establishment of a liaison office of the United Nations with the League of Arab States, following the example set with the African Union, is desirable, because this would certainly help to bolster exchanges of information and would facilitate bilateral meetings. Consultations between the Secretariats of the League of Arab States and the United Nations should, above all, include the Security Council, with a view to more in-depth exchanges on all questions related to the maintenance of international peace and security, and in particular those of the Middle East. Togo ardently hopes that this meeting will outline possibilities that could contribute to strengthening cooperation between the Security Council and the League of Arab States, with a view to ensuring the effectiveness of their actions in resolving conflicts in the region. For the League of Arab States to be an organization that works for peace in close collaboration with the Security Council, this is what my country hopes to see. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Minister Owen for his statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ranjan Mathai, Foreign Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs of the Republic of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by joining others in congratulating you on presiding over this high-level meeting on peace and security in West Asia and North Africa. I also want to thank the UN Secretary General and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States for their valuable statements. Mr. President, developments in West Asia and North Africa have played a major role in shaping the history of the world since ancient times. The region has been the birthplace of major religions and of great civilizations. By virtue of the genius of its people, its strategic location, and its natural resources, the region has been a focus of considerable interest internationally. It is therefore not surprising that the momentous transformation in several countries of the region since late 2010 has been of great interest to the world at large. It has been a general aspiration that these transformations should be peaceful and lead to inclusive and democratic outcomes within these countries. The League of Arab States, as the most important regional organization predating the United Nations, has played a significant role in the unfolding of events in the region and guided the involvement of the international community in these events. Chapter 8 of the UN Charter recognizes the importance of regional organizations and their role in matters related to the maintenance of international peace and security. The Charter also provides a broad framework for this Council's cooperation with the regional organizations while clearly stating the primary responsibility of the Security Council itself for the maintenance of international peace and security. Cooperation between the Arab League and the United Nations started in the early 1950s. Both organizations have benefited from the convergence of objectives to maintain international peace and security despite occasional differences. Enhanced partnership between UN agencies and the Arab League at the institutional level in the fields of human development, capacity building, the empowerment of women and youth have been of great benefit for the region. There is need now for further strengthening the existing cooperation to help the countries in the region in meeting the aspirations of their people for playing a greater role in shaping their destiny. India stands ready to play its role in this regard. Mr. President, it is important to underline here that this Council's cooperation with regional organizations, particularly with the League of Arab States, should also avoid selectivity. Cooperation with one regional organization should not come at the cost of another. The objective of peaceful resolution of conflicts should determine the actions of the Security Council. The international community should guide all UN activities, including its cooperation with regional organizations. Both organizations should use all tools of diplomacy to assist the concerned countries in transiting to an inclusive and participatory polity while maintaining social stability and cohesion. The cooperation should encompass all relevant issues related to international peace and security, particularly the fight against terrorism. The principles of national sovereignty, political independence, unity and territorial integrity must be respected. It is also important that the peculiarities of each situation are kept in mind. Mr. President, if there is one issue that requires immediate attention of both the UN and the League of Arab States, it is the Arab-Israeli conflict, including the Israeli-Palestinian issue. This issue cannot be ignored while we focus on recent developments in the region. There can be no durable peace in West Asia without a just and comprehensive settlement based on the realization by the Palestinian people of their inalienable right to a state of their own with internationally recognized borders, living side by side and in peace and security with Israel. We therefore urge this Council as well as the Arab League to urgently facilitate the resumption of the Middle East peace process. Mr. President, the League of Arab States has been playing an important role in resolving the Syrian crisis. We fully support the peaceful resolution of the conflict through a Syrian-led, inclusive political process based on firm rejection of any military intervention. We urge all sides, Syrian and foreign, to cooperate with the Joint Special Representative, Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, in good faith so that the Syrian crisis can be resolved without any further bloodshed. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Secretary Matai for his statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Jalil Abbas Jilani, Foreign Secretary of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank Germany for convening today's debate on an issue that is close to our hearts and is a very important and long-standing agenda item of the Security Council. I thank the Secretary General for his briefing and welcome the distinguished members attending today's debate. We welcome Mr. Nabil Al-Arabi, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, to the Security Council for the third time within a few months, which is a sign of increasing coordination between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. Mr. President, Pakistan's ties with the Arab world have a deep and constant historical, cultural, religious underpinning. We regard peace and progress of the Arab world as synonymous with our own. Pakistan supports cooperation between the United Nations and the regional organizations in various areas, including maintenance of peace and security, humanitarian assistance, development, as well as human rights. Pakistan believes that regional organizations can play an important role in pacific settlement of disputes. Regional organizations are better placed to understand the ground realities and complexities of situations and therefore bring a complementary role and perspective to the United Nations. Mr. President, the spirit of multilateralism lies in building bridges, finding common ground, and pooling resources. The appointment of UN Arab League Joint Special Envoy and later on the Joint Special Representative on Syria is an example of synergy flowing from multilateralism. Mr. President, the Arab world is going through a period of uncertainty as well as reforms. As a country born of a democratic struggle and as a functional and vibrant democracy, Pakistan fully supports the fulfillment of legitimate aspirations of the people. However, the decision for a change must be channeled through peaceful means, and it should be led and owned by the people themselves. Pakistan has always been opposed, in principle, to outside interference, use of force, and violence. Similarly, we feel that coercive measures lead to hardening of positions and are seldom effective. Dialogue and engagement is the essence of multilateralism, and that needs to be maintained. Mr. President, it is important to reiterate that the age of rejuvenation, termed as the Arab Spring, should not bypass the people of Palestine. They have been suffering under the yoke of tyrannical oppression and unlawful occupation for too long. The gentle winds of spring must visit the Palestinian territory and other occupied lands as well. The Security Council must not remain silent in the face of Israel's continued defiance of the collective will of the international community, its illegal settlement policy, and collective punishment of the Palestinians with the continued blockade of Gaza that has now entered its 6th year. We call on the League of Arab States to continue to play its crucial and indisputable role in highlighting these historical injustices to the world and in working towards a just settlement. Security Council must fully support these efforts. We firmly believe that without the resolution of the core issue, in accordance with the relevant resolution of the Security Council and the Arab Peace Initiative that leads to the re-establishment of independent and viable state of Palestine on the basis of pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital, comprehensive peace plan in the world would not be possible. Mr. President, the UN and the League of Arab States have been building institutional linkages over the past few years. The presence of Secretary General Nabil al-Arabi here today is a proof of that. Apart from peace and security issues, there has also been cooperation in other fields, ranging from counterterrorism to disaster risk reduction and humanitarian issues. We hope that the UN and the League of Arab States will further build on these linkages, increase cooperation and coordination between the United Nations and the Arab League is in the interest of both organizations. We hope that such synergies would lead to peaceful resolution of conflict in the region, especially the attainment of inalienable right of self-determination of the people of Palestine. Mr. President, Pakistan strongly condemns the release of defamatory video and derogatory caricatures in the newspapers. We endorse the call made by the UN Secretary General that these are senseless and disgraceful acts. These are indeed abhorrent examples of incitement to hatred and discrimination against Muslims under the pretext of freedom of expression and opinion. As witnessed, global reaction and consequences of these acts have a strong bearing on international peace and security. International community must therefore take stock of these reprehensible acts and take concerted efforts to introduce and implement adequate measures, including legislation, against these acts at all levels in accordance with the international human rights standards. There is an obvious need to strengthen dialogue and cooperation among all religions, cultures, and civilizations for promoting harmony and coexistence. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Secretary Gilani for his statement. I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. José Felipe Moraes Cabral, Permanent Representative of Portugal to the United Nations.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for organizing this high-level meeting on such an important issue, and I wish to thank you personally for chairing it. I also thank both Mr. Ban Ki-moon and Mr. Nabil Al-Arabi for their very valuable contributions to today's discussion. These are indeed challenging times in the Middle East, where strong emotions and deep-seated grievances have again come to the fore with tragic consequences. We were deeply saddened by the deaths of Ambassador Stevens and his colleagues in Benghazi, and we again wish to extend our sincere condolences to their families and to the American people. There is simply no justification for such acts of violence or attacks against diplomatic missions. They must be unequivocally denounced and condemned. They are also attacks against all of us and against the values enshrined in our Charter. Now is a moment for restraint and sober reflection by all. Certainly, people in North Africa did not fight so bravely for their basic rights simply to have their dreams and legitimate aspirations hijacked by a few. Also, distortion of religion to fuel hatred and to advance narrow extremist agendas must be vehemently condemned. It is imperative that we all work collectively to counter such destructive forces. As President Obama said yesterday, and I quote, "Violence and intolerance has no place among our United Nations," end of quote. Diversity is something that deserves to be celebrated, not feared. Mr. President, the challenges of today's world demand common responses. In this sense, we believe that the Security Council could and should enhance its role and effectiveness as the primary body responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security by developing strong complementary partnerships with regional and sub-regional organizations, as was the case in Libya, Syria, or Yemen. There are ample opportunities to increase the cooperation between the Security Council and the League of Arab States, be it in the realms of preventive diplomacy, mediation, rapid response, conflict resolution, or in the framework of Chapter 7 of the Charter. The United Nations and the League of Arab States must also build upon shared accomplishments. Such is the case in Libya, where together with the African Union and the European Union, they can play a decisive role in supporting Libyans on their path to democracy, reconciliation, peace and prosperity. Such is also the case in Yemen. Also, as the Secretary General said, cooperation between the two organizations should not limit itself to political issues or the crisis of the day, but move to other areas, be they economic, social, or humanitarian. Mr. President, the Middle East faces renewed risks as the bloody conflict in Syria rages on and the Middle East peace process remains in protracted stalemate. Both these conflicts constitute serious threats to international peace and security and must be urgently resolved. Both the Security Council and the League of Arab States have specific responsibilities in this context that they cannot shy away from. There is a pressing imperative for them to renew efforts and work together with a view to reaching a comprehensive, just and lasting peace throughout the region. In Syria, the death toll continues to mount. The tragic humanitarian situation is worsening day by day, and widespread and systematic gross violations of human rights proceed unabated. We appeal to all parties in the conflict to abide strictly by the principles of international humanitarian law and to respect human rights. This terrible human tragedy could have been averted had the Syrian government not responded to the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people with brutal force and shunned all attempts to promote a peaceful political solution. Further militarization of the conflict will only entail further human suffering, threaten the integrity of Syria itself, and destabilize neighboring countries. There is no alternative to a political solution, one that meets the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people, allowing for a peaceful and democratic transition. Mr. President, the appointment of Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi as the Joint Special Representative of the UN and the League of Arab States, as the appointment previously of Mr. Kofi Annan, underlines the cooperation between our two organizations. Mr. Brahimi can count on our full support. However, his chances of success will depend greatly on the support he receives from the Security Council and the League of Arab States, as Mr. Al-Arabi rightly underlined. Together, we must persuade the parties and stakeholders to view his appointments as an opportunity for them to rethink their options, to end the violence, and to engage seriously in an inclusive Syrian-led political transition. To this end, the Council has to exert united, sustained, and effective pressure on all sides, and on the Syrian authorities in particular, in light of their primary responsibilities. Mr. President, Developments in the Arab world render a final settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict ever more urgent. This, however, will remain elusive as long as the Palestinian question, the core of the Arab-Israeli conflict, stays unresolved. Last September, President Abbas submitted a Palestinian application for membership to the United Nations, and the Quartet set a framework for the resumption of direct negotiations and a time frame for their conclusion. A year on, the parties have not yet engaged in a meaningful discussion on the core issues. As a result, the prospects of a free and sovereign Palestinian state are quickly withering away. Evidently, the instruments and tools we have relied on so far have not succeeded and need to be reviewed, replaced, or adapted. Israel's intensified settlement activities, which are illegal, are eroding the very viability of the two-state solution, as Minister Fabius rightly underlined, as well as undermining confidence and weakening moderate voices. At the same time, settler violence has proceeded unabated, and vandalism against places of worship has increased. We appeal to Israel once again to cease settlement expansion and to act decisively against the perpetrators of these acts of violence. The Security Council and the League of Arab States must renew efforts with a view to the swift resumption of meaningful direct talks based on the relevant Security Council resolutions, the internationally endorsed parameters, and the Arab Peace Initiative. In order to succeed, direct negotiations must also establish a clear and credible political time frame. In the most immediate term, we must ensure that the Palestinian state-building achievements are not reversed due to the fiscal and economic predicaments of the Palestinian Authority that the Palestinian Authority is currently facing. However, we must not lose sight that the problem remains a political one, which is the continued occupation that curtails the development of a sustainable Palestinian economy, thus forcing Palestinians to be donor-dependent. We fully understand Israel's legitimate security concerns, as we fully understand that an independent Palestine is not only an inalienable right, but also a question of fundamental justice for the Palestinian people. In conclusion, Mr. President, there are many issues where closer cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States can and should be further deepened. This would undoubtedly be in the interest of international peace and security, as well as of the stability and prosperity of a wide and still unstable region. I thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Morris Cabral for his statement. After consultations among Council members, I have been authorized to make the following statement on their behalf. I quote, "The Security Council reaffirms its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. The Security Council reiterates that cooperation with regional and sub-regional organizations in matters relating to the maintenance of peace and security, and consistent with Chapter 8 of the Charter, can improve collective security. The Security Council recalls all its previous resolutions and statements for its President, which underscore the importance of developing effective partnerships between the United Nations and regional organizations in accordance with the Charter and the relevant statutes of regional and sub-regional organizations. The Security Council expresses its appreciation for the briefings of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Nabil Arabi. The Security Council recognized and further encouraged efforts by the League of Arab States to contribute to collective endeavors to settle conflicts in the Middle East peacefully, as well as to promoting international responses to the transformations experienced in the region, while reaffirming its strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity and territorial integrity of regional countries and to the purposes and principles of the Charter. The Security Council welcomes the intensifying cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States in the wake of these transformations, which reflect the legitimate aspirations of all peoples in the region for freedom, political participation, and economic and social well-being in a pluralistic society. The Security Council reiterates its commitment to a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in the Middle East and to seek a comprehensive resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict and reaffirms the importance of the Arab Peace Initiative. The Security Council also recalls its previous relevant resolutions. The Security Council, recalling its resolutions 2042 and 2043, welcomes the appointment of Joint Special Representative for Syria of the United Nations and the League of Arab States as an important step forward in the cooperation between both organizations and expresses its support for his efforts in continuing the Secretary General's good offices in this regard. The Security Council commends the members of the League of Arab States for their ongoing commitment to international peacekeeping and peacebuilding, including through the contributions of troops to United Nations peacekeeping operations. The Security Council takes note of the General Meeting on cooperation between the Secretariats of the United Nations and the League of Arab States and their specialized organizations held in Vienna from the 10th to the 12th July 2012. The Security Council acknowledges the intention expressed by representatives of both organizations to cooperate across a broad agenda of mutual concern, formulating adequate joint responses where appropriate to humanitarian crises, promoting human rights, freedom of expression, food security, environment protection, and the fight against terrorism, and the illicit trafficking of drugs and arms, while reiterating the need to ensure that all UN efforts to restore peace and security also respect and promote the rule of law. The Security Council recalls its press statement of 12th and 14th September regarding recent attacks on diplomatic personnel and premises to reaffirm that such acts are unjustifiable regardless of their motivations whenever and by whomsoever committed. The Security Council stresses the importance of respect and understanding for religious and cultural diversity throughout the world. The Security Council underlines the common commitment of both the United Nations and the League of Arab States to foster a global dialogue for the promotion of tolerance and peace, and calls for enhanced cooperation in light of recent events to promote better understanding across countries, cultures, and civilizations. The Security Council recognizes the importance of strengthening cooperation on capacity building with the League of Arab States in the maintenance of international peace and security. The Security Council expresses its determination to take effective steps to further enhance cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States in accordance with Chapter 8 of the Charter. The Security Council requests the Secretary General to report as appropriate on further ways of strengthening institutional relations and cooperations between the two organizations. Thank you. And now I give the floor to the representative of Morocco to make a further statement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to say Dankeschön. Thank you very much for having now closed this important debate with this statement. Thank you for having had the patience and the perseverance and for being so stubborn in pushing for this text to be adopted. This is a plus for the United Nations and for the League of Arab States. This statement is merited by the League of Arab States given the unprecedented effort that has characterized the action of the League of Arab States over the last few months, and this statement is wanted by the United Nations. It's an additional milestone in the strengthening of relations between the United Nations and the League of Arab States, and we would stress with great satisfaction that the last paragraph of this statement leaves the door open to even more cooperation and even more strengthening of relations between both institutions. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Nabil El-Arabi, Secretary General of the League of Arab States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll say more than Duncan. I'll say vielen Dank. Mr. President, it was really an excellent initiative taken by Germany to call for this meeting. But I hope that out of this meeting we heard very important statements by 15 members of the Security Council, and I hope that they will consider basic matters, not the general statement that we can hear everywhere. It is important that we try to reach the core of the problems and to see how we can resolve them. With respect to Syria, the question, as many have said today, is to build upon what was agreed upon in Geneva on June 30th. The start of the transitional period, the Security Council has to act, and to act according to Chapter 7. This has to be done, and the 5 permanent members have agreed on a text. Let them build upon that text. With respect to Palestine, I would only say, managing the conflict is not anymore a solution. You have to end the conflict. The Security Council gave up its responsibility with respect to Palestine to something called the Quartet, which, as many have said today, I did not mention that, but many have said today that last year said that there will be something this September. September is about to end, and nothing has happened. It's time that the Security Council will take the matter in its own hands, debate the matter, and see what can be done. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you, Mr. Secretary General, and I would like to add that this statement I just read will be issued as a document of the Security Council under the symbol S/PRST/2012/20. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers, so I use this opportunity to thank you all for your efforts. Thank you so much for supporting this Security Council meeting here. The Security Council has thus concluded its deliberations. The meeting is adjourned.